Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Bennett Tchaikovsky, also known as the accounting professor. I'm about to embark on a request from a colleague tonight, and I thought I would answer these questions before I got started, because if I'm recording with students, I usually don't share the recording, but these are actually some great questions. So my disclaimer and copyright notice: the information and opinions in this presentation are those of the author only and not the author's employer or affiliated organizations, including but not limited to Irvine Valley College and the South Orange County Community College District. Presentation is not for educational purposes only. It does not constitute any legal or accounting advice whatsoever. This presentation is copyright 2024 by Bennett Tchaikovsky. All rights are reserved. Any distribution is strictly prohibited. One other thing, I am going to be showing you previews of the CPA review courses. In the course of doing so, this is their content. So there you go. Okay. So question one, is a CPA review course necessary, and which one? The answer is yes. The reason is you want to have a CPA review course, and it is because when it comes to you taking the CPA exam, it's going to be a battle. And it's something that, like, I can teach accounting. You can take a lot of different accounting classes, but an academic class is not necessarily going to help you prepare for the CPA exam. And although in my financial managerial intermediate accounting courses, I try to give problem-based questions, there's not going to be an easy silver lining. So in terms of, so the answer is yes. And remember that when you walk into one of the testing centers and you turn on the computer and you start going through and taking the test, you're going to want to remember that if you've been practicing with a similar setup prior to you taking the test, you're going to do significantly better. So in terms of CPA review courses, the big ones, I would really say, are going to be, oh, that's my channel, not the one I was actually looking for. Hold on. The big review course, or the two of them, I would say, is going to be UWorld, which used to be known as Rogers CPA Review, and Becker CPA Review. Okay. Both of these will help you prepare and pass the CPA exam. The one thing I would tell you about Becker is that Peter Olinto, who used to be regarded as one of Becker's top instructors, left about a year and a half ago to go to UWorld. And Becker is still using these videos. Good videos. So what I would tell you is the best thing you can do when it comes to choosing a CPA review course, get the free trial. See which one works best for you. Never, ever, ever make a decision based on price. You will lose every single time. So get the CPA review, go through, check it out, look at the videos, preview it, right? See if it's good for you. That's really what you're looking for, because you're going to be spending a lot of hours with this program. And excuse me, right over here, the Roger Farr looks daunting because there's like 22 modules. But if we look at Becker, it says, oh, there's only 6, but within each one, there's like a bunch. So when you're looking at this, don't assume that, oh, Becker's, they're laid out differently. See which one is best for you and go on that decision. Now, the other ones I'm going to mention too, I've had this conversation and I always say what's best for you. One of my students used Ninja CPA review. He passed all 4 parts. But again, that may not work best for you. So it's really going to be which one. I never give a recommendation. You have to go, I preview them, but you need to go try them for yourself. That's the most important thing. Okay. So, question 2. Is it true 500 study hours per section? I don't know where they came up with this number. I don't think that's true. I think that when you look at this particular question, and I've shared this before on my own personal CPA exam journey. When I took the exam in May of 1991, I can't believe it's been that long, but it has been. So I went to UC Santa Barbara, had some amazing instructors, but the one who I really deeply appreciated is a gentleman by the name of Henry Sander. And Henry, if you're out there, please feel free to reach out to me. You're the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today. But that guy worked me. And I took the intermediate accounting I took from him. I tell my students today when I give them an exam, and if I find out that their boss went to UCSB, I tell my student to tell their boss, say that, hey, tell your boss if they went to Santa Barbara that it was like a Henry Sander exam, and they automatically just kind of fall out of their seat because it was that crazy. So what I would tell you is, in terms of the hours of studying, if you put a lot of time into your accounting classes, it will be CPA review and not CPA brand new. And what I mean by a lot of time, I make my students handwrite out the solutions to problems repeatedly. I don't really test multiple choice style. The reason is when you start looking at the CPA exam and the multiple choices that are on that test, on those tests, they're crazy. They're worded very uniquely. So my advice to you would be to, you take challenging accounting courses, but fair. Hopefully you're taking courses where the professors are using problem-based questions. And the reason for that is that you want them for the task-based simulations. You want to have to be able to solve problems. So I think that if you spend a lot of time in your accounting courses and your undergraduate or graduate programs, then the CPA exam will feel more like a review than brand new, and you may not need those number of hours to go through and study. But here's kind of the dilemma, is that if you go over here, right? So if I'm looking at this part here and I see, well, here's the intro. Maybe I never took a governmental accounting class. That's fine. I'll learn it here. State and local government concepts, I'll learn that here for FAR. Public company reporting, you may have gotten some exposure to that in intermediate accounting, special purpose frameworks, right? But then we kind of go through here and we start looking, financial statement ratios, kind of in like managerial accounting, cash and cash equivalents, intermediate accounting, trade receivables, intermediate accounting, usually it's me intermediate accounting 1, inventory, intermediate accounting 1, PP&E, intermediate 1, investments, I teach it in intermediate 1, intangible assets, intermediate 1, payables and accrued liabilities, intermediate 2, debt, financial liabilities, intermediate 2, equity, including earnings per share. That's going to be brutal. But equity, that's intermediate 2. Accounting changes and error corrections, intermediate 2. Contingencies and commitments, probably intermediate 2. Revenue recognition, intermediate 1. That's where I teach it. Fair value measurements, accounting for income taxes, intermediate 1 and 2. So if you only take the first semester of intermediate accounting, or you don't put the time into it, or you breeze your way through it. This is the CPA exam is like the great equalizer. It's not the Denzel Washington like equalizer, it's not that kind of equalizer, although it may feel like it. You're talking about it's a pretty challenging test. And it's if you don't take intermediate 1 and 2, going back to what this was asking, 500 study hours, if you have to relearn it all on your own, it could be really, really tough. So that's what I would kind of suggest, is that taking intermediate 1 and 2 is pretty critical. Could it be 500 hours? I'm going to be 500 miles, or yeah, it could be, but it shouldn't take, if you took challenging courses from professors that use problem-based questions, in general, you'll be in pretty good shape. It kind of saddens me that most of the professors that are out there are using multiple choice, but that's their decision. I'm just a problem-based guy. There you go. I like to cause problems. Okay. So is it true? Could be. It just depends on how challenging your courses were when you were going through your undergraduate education. Okay. Now, here's a great question. Okay. So does the order of which section you take matter? Or what is the recommended order? So you would hear most people say bar, reg, audit, and possibly bar, business analysis and reporting. However, there's a couple different things that you have to really think about. In terms of the ordering of the sections, I would probably say that audit may be looked at as being one of the easier ones. FAR is definitely, financial accounting and reporting is definitely looked at as one of the more challenging sections of basically of the CPA exam. So far, a lot of people will say, okay, I'm going to take this first. Regulation is going to go through and cover taxes for basic taxes, as well as some other legal concepts, individual corporate taxation, legal concepts. If you're a tax practitioner, or if that's what you're doing, this section may be a little bit easier, but I think that most people view reg as a little bit easier than FAR. Auditing is a weird test. And what I say by this is, like, I passed it with a 75, but really a lot of times you don't really learn about auditing until you're actually going out and doing it. So that's why if you had to take this when you were actually kind of starting and going through and doing it, basically starting on your career, not going to necessarily be the end of the world. But some people view audit as being like a little bit on the easier side, although what I'm hearing now about the exam is that it's pretty challenging. By the way, just so you know, and you'll kind of see over here, updated. And I think as they're getting feedback, probably from the AICPA, in terms of how they're going through and testing, the review courses will go through and update their material. Very, very important to look at. So in terms of the order, now the final one, and this is actually kind of important. When it comes to the remaining sections, ISC, which is I think it's internal systems and controls. Internal systems and controls. This is one of the optional ones. I would not touch this unless you really had some experience with this. The other one is tax compliance and planning, or TCP. With TCP, if you have been working doing taxes for like the last 2 or 3 years, this is probably the one I would take, because you're going to be very familiar with it. That's at least what I've been hearing from students. For BAR, which is basically business analysis and reporting, which most students take. When you look at this analysis, this is kind of like financial statement analysis, managerial accounting. budgeting. This over here, indefinite lived intangible assets, including goodwill. That's gonna be intermediate one. Charlie develops software, intermediate one. More revenue recognition, intermediate one. Stop compensation, intermediate two. R&D, intermediate one. Business combinations, you're going to have to learn that on your own. That's consolidations. These two you're going to learn on your own. Derivatives and hedge accounting, that's going to be in investments or intermediate one, but just be wary. When I taught the derivatives and hedge accounting, you barely have time to get to it. So you may be taking intermediate. It's just the more you work through KISO, the better off you're going to be. Leases, intermediate two. Public company reporting, financial statements of employee benefit plans, and state and local governments. So there you're kind of seeing things there. So in terms of ordering, you could say maybe FAR, reg, maybe bar, TCP, and then maybe finishing up with audit. That might be a way to go. I think part of your choices here is that if you're starting to work and you have a remaining section to get done, which whenever is going to be going through and doing. So I think the frustrating thing right now is in terms of the exam itself is the amount of time it's taking to get the results. So just kind of keep that in mind that once you take a part, go start studying for the next one. Don't stop. Okay. So time saving and test taking tips. If you've taken challenging and meaningful accounting courses during your undergraduate education or your graduate studies, that is going to save you time when preparing for the CPA exam. It's pretty much as simple as that. Test taking tips. You want to have a CPA review course. When you get to multiple choice questions, and this is the way that I think the exams are now set up, is you're going to have the first 2 hours are like 50 multiple choice questions. The last 2 hours are 7 task-based simulations. So if I come over here to, let's go back to FAR. We'll see how I do because I know I'm going to mess up questions, but let's go ahead to payables and accrued liabilities. Why not? Let's go ahead and start some questions and see how badly I do. Poorly I perform. So what's going to happen right now? This is exciting. How am I going to blow this question? Okay. Now, this is what the exam will generally look like. And what's really important is that you go through and skip around. So a test taking tip, and I always tell my students this, the exam is very psychological. You have to go through and build your confidence for the test. So if you see a company where you're like, oh, and dude, I have no idea what this answer is, go to the next question, flag it, and go to the next one. Because you have to completely go through and be very quick. Let's say I try to answer this one. So Bal Corp declared a $25,000 cash dividend on May 8th, year one, paid to stockholders of record on May 23rd, year one, payable on June 3rd, year one. As a result of this cash dividend, working capital was not affected, decreased on June 3rd, decreased on May 23rd, decreased on May 8th. So the date of record is meaningless to us as accountants. It's more important to transfer agents. When I made the declaration of the dividend, and working capital is defined as, I think it's current assets minus current liabilities, sounds something like that. So when I look at this, my working capital, when I made the dividend declaration, hold on, let's see if it will pop up for me. Maybe it doesn't like my browser. I think that's what's going on. I'm guessing it decreased on the date it was declared, which was May 8th. Because I would debit dividends, credit dividends payable, that's increasing my liabilities, therefore reducing my working capital. I was correct. Wow, that's amazing. There you go. So, declaration date, I like dividends, and you're going to close it out to retain earnings, but here or there. So, when you're going through and answering these questions, and by the way, both Becker and Roger or UWorld will be providing you solutions to the question, explaining why the answer you got was correct or incorrect. So that's something just to kind of think about when you want to be skipping around. By the way, if you haven't gone through the multiple choice questions twice, I can usually tell who is going to pass and not pass the exam. If students tell me that they only went through the questions once, probably not going to pass the exam because you have to be very, very fast. The exam will repeat questions. If you've gone through and studied these questions, you'll do pretty well on the test. It's just, it comes down to practice and repetition. So, kind of like, test taking tips, skip around. Start with the ones that you feel the most confident with first, and then go to the other questions. One of my students once told me that I gave them very good advice. And after they passed the exam, I said, "What was the advice I gave you?" Because I do talk to a lot of students. And they said, "Well, you said, Tchaikovsky, well, take care of yourself and go on a hike." And I said, "Wow, go on a hike." But you can't study for 8 hours a day. You're going to go totally bananas. You have to do it in increments. It's whatever works for you. If you want to play like classical music in the background, if that can kind of churn something in your mind when you're going through and taking the exam, that can work, right? It's really entirely up to you. Um, other testing tips. Make sure you go visit the center where you're going to be taking the exam. Like, don't wait until the last minute to go visit where you're going to be taking the test. Have it all planned out. Know how long it's going to take you to get there. Do a walkthrough. Use Microsoft Excel when you're studying. That was one of the ones that came from one of my students. The worst thing you can do is be unprepared or be underprepared, because if you're not ready to go, you don't want to get in there and score a 48. It's just not, you don't want to do that. You have to put in the time to study, and you're going to have to be fast. It's really a matter of going through these questions quickly. If you're taking an intermediate accounting class, and say, if you're given 2.5 hours to complete an exam, see if you can do it in an hour and a half. Try to finish early. If you put that kind of time pressure on yourself heading into the test, when you get into the time pressure, it's not going to feel as bad. Try to finish fast, finish the exam early. When you're at home practicing, the more you practice, the better you're going to do. Practice the questions repeatedly. That's really the best part of it. So, and again, you want to skip around questions. And by the way, too, if you see questions you've never seen before, do not panic, because more than likely those are going to be like experimental questions. So when you see questions on the exam that you've never seen before, don't panic. Just kind of take a step back and really say to yourself, okay, I have no idea what this is. I've given this example before, but it bears repeating. When I took basically FAR, maybe like FAR and like reg, parts of reg were combined, but I got to the second day and I was able to do the first 20 multiple choice questions really fast. Go to question 21, 22. I have no idea what these questions are. Never seen them before, and I'd studied. So I say, okay, I'm going to work on the problem. So I do the problems in the back of the booklet, and then I go to the other 40 questions on the multiple choice. And these are all brand new. And I just said, okay, I'm going to guess. I walked out of that exam. It was a 4.5 hour test. I walked out of that exam 2 hours early. And the crazy thing that happened was that, like back then, you could actually mail the booklets home to yourself and then you could grade them on your own. So when I took the exam, I was able to affix postage to the booklets. They mailed it to us because it was taken with pencil, paper, no calculators. Wow, May of 1991. I'm an old man. So May of 91, that's when I took it. And I was able to self-grade it. The 40 questions that I answered when I looked at the CPA review course that I was using, which was a precursor to UWorld, they had in their solutions A or D, B or C. And the instructors didn't even know what the answers were. And these are the experts in the field. They've never seen this before. So when you take the exam, if you've studied all the material and you see questions you've never seen before, don't panic, because everybody else is in the same boat, right? So everybody's in the same position. You're seeing it for the first time and you studied. Everybody's seeing it for the first time. So just say, hey, I'm going to guess, do the best thing I can do, guess it through. There's really not a lot else you can do. But what happened as a result was they added 7 difficulty points to that part of the exam. That ended up being my highest score. I got an 84 on basically what was known as practice. So there you go. It's just one of those things you just don't know what you're going to get. But, it's you're not searching for perfection. You're searching for being a part of the 300 club, meaning that you have 75 scores on every single part. But you want to kind of study is you don't want to study for Elijah Watt-Sells, which is that crazy award they give, but you want to put in the time. You have to put in the time into this test. You have to become fast. And it's kind of like in the movie The Matrix. It's like you're faster, you're faster, right? We want to see you go really fast. And then it's like everything's code. But so fourth wall, right? So just do your very, very best. Try, and it's like be in good physical shape, work out, go on hikes, give yourself that time to have peace of mind, and you'll do great on the test. But again, there's so many different factors. But if you had a weaker education, that's where basically the CPA review will help you supplement it. Because trust me, I know people, there was a student I knew who did not take intermediate accounting, but he passed FAR. However, that student was an attorney. So he used the material in Becker to basically pass the CPA exam. So just remember, it's like there's no magic bullet. There's no magic pill. There's nothing magical about it. There are no magical creatures. It's just really it's a fight between you and the exam. That's really what it is. There's no other way to go. So let's look to see if we had any other questions. So right over here. So any time saving test taking tips? Put the time into your classes now. Okay. And so thank you. If you have any other questions out there, please feel free to drop a message below, and I'm more than happy to make them. Just remember, pass that exam, get it done. Try to get it done before you start working, and you can absolutely do this. I've had many students that have passed the CPA exam. It is just a lot of dedication. So, and there you go. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I will see you on the next video. Have a great day.